chapter 7. We are in chapter 7. Just a quick note, this is your last class for the week. We do not have class on Friday. So that means we will be back here on Monday. Please remember that the class, all assignments are due by Sunday at 11:59. So if there's any assignments you have not turned in, please try to get those in by Sunday at 11:59. All right. Quick recap. We're discussing long-term goals, and we talked about how your long-term goals are part of your career plan, and you will be setting those long-term goals. Hopefully by now you have identified someone that you can speak to in regards to your career plan or what your career plan may look like, so they can give you some insight. Also, with your discussion post, please remember when you're responding to someone, because you have your initial post and then you have a response, please do not put I agree or anything of that, or copy and paste, because if you put I agree, that's not considered a response. A response is 40% of that grade. Your initial posting is 60%, so you don't want to miss points just because you didn't follow those guidelines. And just as a reminder, please don't copy and paste from the book. Everybody's reading the book, so try to just put it in your own words. You can obviously quote from the book and just say according to the author, and then obviously quote from the book, but then just try to add a couple more, sentences in your own words. That's all it requires. Um, you are going to start preparing for your mock interview and your resumes. Someone asked, is it with a professor? No, it's not with the professor, it's with career services. So hopefully everyone understands that you will be having your mock interview done with your respective career services. All right. So even though your resume is going to be done through your career services department, I'm going to ultimately defer to them, because whenever someone writes a resume, we all have our own little nuances that we use. Me, when I write resumes, when I've written resumes in the past, when I've reviewed them working in HR for a small time, what I think is great is one thing, what your career services may think is great is another. There's no right or wrong to it. So if I say anything that is contrary to what your career services person is saying, just note, tomato, tomato is really just about, you know, a person's personal experience. But um, either what I say or what they say, they both are correct, because they still should be along the same lines. And you'll see what I mean once we get into it. But what is a resume? Obviously, a resume is a written document of your experience and your education. The whole purpose of your resume is to let someone know what type of candidate you are. So, as you're writing your resume, yes, you're going to be putting down the typical stuff, the job description of where you've worked. But one thing that I like to do when I write my resume, and I'll talk about it when we start talking about the experience section, is use what I call PAR statements, which is, saying something about a problem, an action, a result that I've taken to make that job that I'm listing. So you can stand out. So to make that job listing stand out, and to make the person that's reading it, on my resume, know that I was very successful at it. Because if me and 5 other people are saying we all have worked similarly at a certain type of job, how are they going to distinguish between me and someone else? It's going to be how well I say I've done the job. So, for example, if I'm up for a teaching gig and I put, oh, I worked as a SLS instructor for Southern Tech, and then, the next person, there's what, 3 or 4 of us that actually teach this course, they're all going to put they worked at Southern Tech um, in an SLS course. What's going to be the distinguishing factor? Well, maybe it's going to be the success rate of my students, it's going to be the attendance rate, it's going to be the student surveys. So I'm going to talk about that. I got a 95% success rate. I happen to have one of the highest survey rates. I think I only had one student didn't make it last term, out of 3 classes. So I'm very proud of that, right? So those are going to be my stats. I know a lot of people, don't have those stats because, for whatever reason. So I'm very proud of that. So I'm going to, use that to stand out with my resume, just so they'll know that, oh, okay, this is an effective instructor. So, even though you may be up against other people that have similar backgrounds, you explaining how well you've done the job is going to be oftentimes a distinguishing factor between you and them. So that's what that resume is designed to do. We talked about keywords, and we're going to wrap up this week with this idea of keywords. Why are keywords so important? Many companies use a software system that I'll discuss in a second to cipher through resumes to see which ones are relevant, because unfortunately with the internet, so many people have access to jobs. You'd be surprised, people that don't live in your area, people that don't even live in the state, they all have access to these jobs, and you'd be surprised how many people are applying for them, sometimes hundreds, right? And so companies may not have the manpower to go through hundreds and hundreds of resumes, so a lot of them are using the software. One of the key things that the software does is you look for keywords from the job posting. So that's why we reiterate that it's so important for you to know how to read that job posting, because a lot of us will kind of like skim through the job posting, but you really got to pay attention to what's in that job posting and then try to match some of those keywords in the job posting to what you've done. You don't have to have done the exact same job. If that job description is talking about customer service, which if you work in VA, or any of you guys, you may work, in residential or commercial, and you may have to deal with a customer. Definitely, I know VA students will. Customer service is going to be important no matter where you work. So if you've done customer service, I don't care if you worked at Target, you're going to have that word customer service on your resume somewhere. That could be a keyword that they pull. Like, now you won't know exactly what keywords that they're using. They can use any number of them from their job posting, but you want to have as many of them in your resume as possible. So here's an example of a welding job description, and they posted these are the essential duties. And so obviously what pops out for my welding students, you already know, reading blueprints is going to be a big deal. Installing torches, definitely welding equipment, but safety, like, that is going to be all over the place. And maybe you work somewhere where you had to be safe. Again, it doesn't have to be as a welder. You could have worked for UPS or Amazon, and you've had safety protocols. So you're going to make sure safety protocols are on your resume. Routine maintenance may be something that you've done. Maybe you worked in an auto mechanic shop or whatever, and you've had to do routine maintenance. So again, you're going to go through that job description and highlight and try to pinpoint some of these keywords that you think will be a trigger, and make sure they're in your resume, if applicable, as much as possible. Well, how do you put, if you're going into welding and it's not something you've done before? Well, I may put, if I'm in school, currently in school, I may put a quick little note about what I'm learning in school, and maybe throw in blueprint and installing torches. I mean, work with your career services person, but that way it'll be somewhere on my resume, right? So they'll know I have experience with that, even if it's just academically. But that's why it's so important. And that system that I referenced is called an automatic tracking software system. And, it's good and it's bad. I have two thoughts about it, because one, yes, if you're getting hundreds and hundreds of resumes, it's not really reasonable to expect, sometimes these really small institutions, they don't have enough time to go through all those resumes, or they're not going to go through them very well. So of course you want to use a tracking system. Conversely, though, a system is only as good as the user. So if the system could really omit a lot of applications that could be really good. So that's one of the downsides of it. I know I've been, disqualified for a job because of automatic tracking system. Now, of course, I can blame myself because even though I'm sitting here teaching this resume writing, listen, I get tired too, right? Writing resumes over and over again, because every time you apply for a job, you may have to tweak your resume, right? And if you're looking for a job, let me ask you guys, how many resumes do you think you have to put out if you're looking for a job? Give me a thumbs up if you think 25 or less. At least 25 job applications you have to submit. Okay, got you. Now, who thinks it's more than 25? Like between 25 and 50. Yeah. So definitely at least 25, but you're probably going to be doing maybe like 50 or more, right? Yeah, that's a lot. So imagine, like, hopefully every time you don't have to tweak, but imagine if you did. Isn't that annoying? Like, I know I've messed up, tweaking, and I put the wrong company on the cover letter. I've done all kinds of mistakes, and I was like, okay, well, I know I'm not getting that job, right? Because I called them the wrong thing. Because you get tired, so even me, I'm preaching to the choir, and there's been times where I'm like, man, they're just gonna get this resume. I'm not gonna go through trying to match up all these keywords, because it is a tiring process. It's one of the reasons why, I'll be honest, people stay at jobs and they're just like, they don't want to go through the process of applying for another job, right? Because it is so tedious. It's very tedious, but it's something that you have to do, which is why you can end up having like tons and tons of resumes, because every time you apply for a job, unless the job is very, 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 very similar, like I'm going to apply for a job at a pet hospital, right? Or a pet clinic. Okay, that job can be similar enough that I can send them the same resume. Or, if I'm applying for HVAC and the HVAC is very, very, very similar, the work, maybe I can, send the same resume, but that's why you got to read the job description, because again, you just never know if they're using this automatic tracking system, and you just don't want your resume to get dinged. Now, what should your resume look like? Well, typically most resumes, as you all have seen, is going to have some type of heading, your summary, skills. I think it's optional, but some people have them, some people don't. Definitely your experience in education. And then there are even more optional sections that you can put on there that some people do, some people don't. They want your resume to try to stay like 2 pages or less. So sometimes it can be difficult to add all that stuff in. I'll tell you right now, my resume is not 2 pages. Like, I'd be lucky to get it down to 4. I've tried, but the longer you've been in the game, it's harder to keep it down to 2 pages. Give me 1 second, guys. All right. So when it comes to the heading, the book is going to tell you to, have your name, have your address, your phone number, your LinkedIn page. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I would not put my address. That's old school. Like, I would not put my address on there for obvious reasons. Number one, if you're looking through Indeed.com, and a lot of times with Indeed, they'll ask you if you want your resume to be public. Like, do you really want your address public? I'm not saying we can't trust people, but you can't trust people. Like I definitely, you don't know, it could be an old crazy boyfriend, girlfriend. Like, listen, I wouldn't put my address on there. Um, I definitely think everything, phone number, and even now people have Google numbers. Your email address, definitely. Your LinkedIn, definitely. But address, I personally would not put on there. If they want to know where I live, sometimes you can just put, Central Florida or Florida, but South Florida. But I definitely am not putting my address. I mean, I can understand companies wanting to know where you live, but most of you are going to, be going into an office. Like sometimes if you're remote, they want to make sure you're at least in the state, or even sometimes if you are going on site, they want to make sure that you don't live like 2 hours away. I get it, but just ask me because I'm not going to put it on my resume. But anyway, but other than that, the heading that chapter 7 discusses is important because you do want to have as many ways for people to contact you as possible. Don't be like me. Like literally, I feel like one of those people that are I'm teaching things, but I'm also telling you don't be like me because I've messed up on all of them. Make sure if you have your phone number and you are applying for jobs, guys, make sure your voicemail box is clear. Make sure your voicemail box is clear. I have been embarrassed a time or two with a company saying, "Hey, Miss Taylor, I've been trying to reach out to you." They had to send me a text because my voicemail box was full. Now, I'm going to blame it on these Florida phone numbers because when I lived in Jersey, I did not have this issue. Like, what's up with the spam calls down here? Like, am I the only one with this drama? Like, I did not have so many spam calls until I came to Florida. I don't know if Florida just sells all their numbers. Like, what's up with that, right? So my mailbox is always like filling up, and I have to block a lot, which is so annoying. But I'm definitely gonna blame it on that. But you know, try to make and if you know that you are in the job market, especially for those of you that are graduating, answer your phone. Like, don't be like me. You know how we don't answer numbers that we don't know, right? But if you are in the job market, answer your phone. What I try to do is go to a company's website and see what area code they have. So if someone's calling me from that area code, I'm mindful of the fact that I'm in the job market. Don't always just be like, okay, they can leave me a message. Like, listen, it's competition, my friend. And I've had people reach out to me and say, oh, I want to set up an interview or ask for information, and I never hear from them because they probably moved on to the next person and maybe they like somebody better before they got to me. So you never know. Like, so you don't want that drama. You don't want them having to leave you a message and they go to the next person. That person picks up and they think they're great, and then they be like, okay, well, forget this other person I had to leave a voicemail for. So try to just be active with that. When it comes to your summary, and we're going to be circling back on this summary a little bit later, but it shouldn't be more than 3 sentences, and it kind of just tells the reader what to expect when looking at your resume. It's a brief overview of what it is you're trying to accomplish and what's in your resume. So it could be something as simple as over 15 years of you know technical experience in XYZ with a strong, I don't know, um, talent in, in team management. And then it could be like looking to transition into a new career in the welding industry. It can be something like that. It's important because a lot of HR people will start with this summary to be like, okay, what am I looking at? It's also important if you are transitioning, right? So if you've only worked for, maybe you worked in a hospital and now you're transitioning into HVAC, like that's going to be real different, right? So you want to prepare the reader in your summary to say, oh, okay, this person is transitioning. So their expectations won't be like, well, how come I don't see any HVAC stuff? This is all, hospital stuff. But if you have it in your summary, then they understand. Again, defer to your career services person what they tell you, but that is the advice that I have given my clients in the past. All right. And also, it's part of what we call your personal brand statement. Just keep that in the back of your mind because we'll be using that terminology next week as part of your personal brand statement. Sorry about that. All right. So again, skills skills is something that you may want to do, may not want to do. It all depends on how much experience you have. Like, if again, this may be a good place, and defer to your career services person to maybe put some stuff that you've learned in school if you don't have a lot of career experience, or if your experience is not at all relevant, then maybe you want to put that you have that skill. So maybe they'll know, okay, well, this person has a skill set to do this. Don't assume because you just put, oh, I graduated in this program, that they're automatically going to be like, oh, this is a rock star, right? So, you got to really push, right? If you're trying something new, you got to really push. Even though most technical schools do a great job at connecting with companies that are looking for people right out of school, right? So that's great. Which is another reason why you really want to work with your career services, because they look for companies that already know you're starting an entry level job. But, that you may also want to look for your own company. So skills may be a good place to talk about things you know how to do, even if you haven't done them in your actual experience. I say it's optional with skills, but if you're a career services person, puts it on your resume is not wrong. You really want to pay attention to, though, the education. Of course, the education has a standard way that it looks. You always typically see, a line with your position you've held, you know, either followed by the company or the company's first, and then followed by the position you've held, and then the times and dates that you've worked there. Now, what comes after that, what I normally do is write up a brief paragraph of my job description. But what I do in addition to that is I follow it up with like 3 bullet points of how well I did a job. And I told you those are called PAR statements: problem, action, and result. So using the example that I had with the school, like me and 5 other people are teaching this course. So we're all gonna put what we do in the SLS program. But I may also put, and it doesn't follow exactly problem, action, result, but I may put the results of my courses: 95% pass rate of over, 1,000 students year over year, right? That sounds more impressive than just, oh, I teach SLS, right? That's letting people know how many students I see on an annual basis, how many people pass my class. They're like, oh, okay, that's an effective instructor, right? 100% satisfaction rate with over 15 courses in an annual year, right? That sounds good, right? So in addition to putting what I do, I'm putting how well I've done it. So that helps you to stand out. Now, the worst thing you can do, I'm just being honest, is put just a bunch of bullet points about your job description. If you're in the VA program, ran a catheter, know how to restrain animals. It's like, this is not a cafe menu, right? So you don't want to write your resume like a cafe menu. You want to write your resume like a brief description of what you've done, and then some actionable success statements of how well you've done it. Does that make sense? Make sense, guys? Any questions on that? I mean, it's a big part. I mean, it's it's the biggest part of your resume, right? Which is one of the reasons why we have you work with career services, because it's a technique. It takes time to learn how to do it like that too. And then even if you're, trying to get a job with the government, that's even more. I mean, not sure who's trying to get a job with the government now, but they even have their own set way of doing resumes, and you have to like learn how that process goes too. But that's a story for another day. So there's a lot of different formats when it comes to resumes. Most of us are used to what they call the chronological format, which is basically you starting with your most recent job down to your earliest job. Even though most resumes say 10 years of experience, sometimes you may have to put 15 years. I went for a job once that wanted someone with experience working at a pharmaceutical company. Well, right out of the military, I worked for some pharmaceutical company, but that was like in 2000s. That was what at the time, like 20 years ago from when I had applied for that job. But I put it on my resume because like they wanted people that had experience working, with clinicals. Well, I did do that. If I only went back 10 years, they would have never seen that. So I did have to adjust my resume to make sure I was able to put that on there, you know. So I won't say only go back 10 years, I think it depends on again what, what type of work that you've done. You know, I've had jobs, I've been teaching for 18 years, but I've also been in nonprofit for 25 years and I've been in the financial industry for 11 years. I've been a consultant, for 10 years. So I got a lot of different resumes as you can imagine, and some of those jobs overlapped. Clearly, me working as an educator for the most part, I was an adjunct, and so I had a job, full-time job while I was teaching. So I may have an educator resume, I have a consulting resume, I have a nonprofit resume. You get my point? So, you can pick and choose what you put on your resume as long as it's truthful and you're making it relevant to the position. There are some other types of resumes, combination resumes. There's some technical resumes that IT people used to use where they don't list the company first. They actually list the technical skill that they have, and then they list where they've worked with that technical skill. I don't know how popular it is, but I do know that, some people do it that way as well. Be mindful. I mean, hopefully, most of you know how to convert your resumes into PDF format because these companies are using these tracking systems or they are using systems that upload your resume right into their HR software. They'll request that you do either a PDF or a Word document, right? Um, be listen, pay attention to that because that could be a little stickler for them. Like I don't know if you've ever seen in job postings, you can almost hear the attitude in the HR person. We will not review your resume if it's not in PDF or if it's not in Word. I'm like, whoa, you take it a bit too serious, but it's probably because they have some type of conversion program that they're using. So make sure you pay attention to that. Like you don't want them to get all upset because you didn't put it in PDF and they told you to put it in PDF. And then also it's just safer anyway to put it into PDF. That way sometimes people download your resume and they could be like looking at it and highlighting it and then mess it up and make a mistake and delete something if it's in Word. So you don't want that drama. So I just say keep it safe, just put it in PDF form. If they want it, unless they want it in a Word format, put it in a PDF. All right, we talked about non-traditional resume. Obviously you want to check your resume. Like I said, don't don't be like me where you're not paying attention, you're sending out so many, you make a mistake and put the wrong company's name on it, or you forget to delete certain things. Really take your time. Again, I know it is painful to apply. We've already said you can send out 50 resumes. I'll be honest with you, I've sent out hundreds. I don't even want to give you that number because I don't want to scare you. But I'm very aggressive when I look for jobs, and I can say I tend to, I would say because I'm so aggressive. Now, of course, I have a lot of different industries I've been in. But because I'm so aggressive when I'm looking for a job, I'll typically get a job within 2 months or under. But that's because I'll send out 200 resumes. No, I'm not the person that sends it out just to anybody. Now, I'll send it out, to people I qualify for. Now, it does, you know, change the fact that I do work remotely. So, but that's pros and cons because a lot of companies are pulling back from remote thanks to these baby boomers that don't understand remote. But there's more opportunity because I can like apply, anywhere. I can work for anybody. So I have more options, but a lot of my options are outside of Florida as a result of that. Um, but if you have the opportunity to, and look, don't just use Indeed, don't just use LinkedIn, Google companies and go to these companies' websites. That's really the best way to do it. And you may have to push out 100 resumes. I'm just being honest with you guys. Like that is going to be the difference between you and somebody else, right? It's how bad you want it. And I'm a little crazy with it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm crazy with it. Like I tell everybody, I used to tell all my good friends that were in the job market that was like, girl, how do you always get a job? I'm like, because I don't sleep. I can't sleep or eat if I don't have money coming in. So if I'm down and out of my luck, and I was one of the ones that got hit with the federal freeze. I was a federal contractor, and I got froze just like everybody else. um I was looking hard, and so I put out 200 resumes probably, yeah. And so I got a lot of callbacks. I got some, we were trying to wait to see what the president's doing, and I got some hits. But it's because I'm that aggressive. I don't want to put frosting on that cake and make it seem like it's easy. You got to do the work in order to get what you need, and everybody has to do it. I don't care, how many degrees a person has. Everybody is in that same boat. When it comes to your professional references, obviously at the bottom of your resume, you want to put references available upon request. Um, you want to have at least 3 personal references. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I was surprised to learn I was 51 years of age last year when I learned that people actually use their friends as references. Am I that dumb? I didn't know that. Anybody else knew people did that? I had somebody tell me, and this was a professional person talking about they use their ex-husband as a reference. I was like, what? Am I really that gullible? It's never dawned on me to do something like that. I just couldn't even imagine. I would be so scared. I'm scary in that way though. What I do as opposed to that, I've had references, of people that I've worked with. If I work with a person like 5 years or more, 10 years or more, they know me, right? So I have references, a good maybe 4 references that, you know, has stayed with me for years and vice versa. And these people know me well enough to know whether they worked for me or I worked for them to be able to give a good solid reference, people I trust. Make sure when you are looking for a job though, guys, that the people know that you're looking for a job. So if you're going to put them down as a reference, especially if you're actively looking for a job, make sure you call them and tell them or send them a text or something saying, hey, just FYI, I'm in the job market. I'm at phase 2. This job, I gave them you as a reference. What I typically do with my references is I um, give them the job description. So if I am applying for a job, I will send them the job posting, right? And I'll say, hey, I'm looking for this job. They may call you. This job has to do with finance. So just talk about the work we've done together in finance. I don't know what, and to me, when it's genuine, and you don't have to worry about prepping somebody, your ex-husband. It's like, I was really shocked to know that. But the same thing with your information. If you are putting together your reference list, like, don't put people's address. I wouldn't even put their phone number. I put their email address. If they want their phone number, they can ask them for it, because, I don't like giving out personal information. Nowadays, you just never can be too safe. So I'll put their name, I'll put, their title, their company, and then their email address. That's all I do. The book is a little bit more old school. So they're going to, obviously put address, but addresses nowadays, you stay away from that, right? All right. Any questions? Any questions? And don't run off, because I also want to go over your assignment after this participation question, but I also want to go over your assignment. Your participation question says to list 3 different / unique things you learned about resumes today. And it doesn't have to be from me. It can also be from the book. 3 things that you learned about resumes today. Hopefully you learned something, or else I'm gonna feel bad. Y'all know I'm sensitive about my art. But hopefully you learned something, right? Even if you just learn one thing from me, you can grab 2 more from the book, right? List 3 things that you learned about resumes today. Everybody got it? Your one of your homework assignment has more to do with these keywords. I wanted to, just highlight something specific, because a lot of the students always forget step 1. Step 1 tells you to list 3 web addresses of 3 job postings. I want you to look at least 3 job postings, right? And then list 3 hard skills and soft skills that you found in common in those 3 postings. So you only have to list 6 things, but the 3 and 3, they need to be in common in those postings. But make sure you include the web addresses. So I see a lot of people forget the web addresses in this assignment. And I want you guys to get all your points. I hate when people, they do the work, but then they just didn't read the assignment very closely and they forget to do something. So 3 websites, put the websites, just copy and paste the links. And then 3 things you found in common, technical and soft skills. All right. So I just wanted to point that out. You don't have to write that down. You'll find it in your assignment. All right. Any questions, guys? Any questions? All right. Be mindful that all your work is due. Go ahead, Darren.
You said something about a book.
Yeah, I was saying that when you answer with 3 things you learned about resumes today, you don't have to just go by what I said. You can also go by what's in the book on chapter 7.
Is that in Canvas or something?
Yeah, you don't. Okay, so y'all know y'all have a book, right? You don't know you have a book?
Nah, I
Yeah, it's
ain't
right
even
in
know that.
Canvas. Yeah, it's the very top of your Canvas. So you go to your home page, there's a book
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, one second.
Nah, it just say career
I'm gonna
prep.
show you. Hold on. I'm gonna share my screen again. One second. All right, let me share my screen so you can see. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording here.